Okay, so good morning everybody. This is Drew Smith. Drew is a guild member. And Drew, tell us how you got into this genealogy business.
Well, Paul, it all got started when, first I'm from a part of the United States, South Carolina, where people are expected to know who their people are. And so there was always an interest of some degree as to who my relatives were, who my ancestors were. And I got a little more serious about it in the early 1990s. I had a favorite aunt who passed away, and I realized that that entire generation was just about gone. My mother was still alive, my father, but most of their siblings were gone, and there were very few left. And so I thought, I'd have to get serious about this now. So I started reaching out. Now, I was an IT guy by background. I was a charter member of America Online, AOL.
Wow.
And that was in 1989. So when I got serious about genealogy in 1992, I said, okay, there must be genealogists online. There were certainly on America Online, on CompuServe, on Delphi, on Genie, on Prodigy. I went to all the sites that were the early sort of pre-big internet stuff and looked for the genealogists, and I found them.
Right.
And eventually, for example, CompuServe had Dick Eastman and some of the others. So they were all there in the early days. And I was, within a year, I was a volunteer in the America Online Genealogy Forum, helping other people with their research. And within another couple of years, I was writing articles for the magazine Genealogical Computing, which was published by Ancestry.com on how to use America Online for genealogy. And then they needed someone left who had a column, and they said, would you like to have a column? And so I ended up writing a bunch of articles, and that led to speaking engagements and led to everything else.
So you then took it to the next level with your one-name study. Talk to us a bit about that, because I'm sure that other guild members would be very interested.
So when I got started in genealogy, my name is Smith, and I realized that's going to be tough to research. My mother's name was Martin. Her mother's name was King, surname, and these are all some of the most common surnames in the English language. So I was more interested in finding some surnames that looked a little more easy to work with. And one was my grandfather Martin's mother, whose surname was Bodie. And it was spelled B-O-D-I-E, at least in South Carolina. But I found, as a matter of time, that the original spelling, if you can call it an original spelling, was B-O-D-D-I-E, as it came into Virginia and made its way into the Carolinas. And my branch dropped one of the D's. I often say that they were the poorer branch and could not afford to have both D's in their name. So I started researching the Bodie family more than all the other branches because they were a little easier to work with. They didn't have common names. And as a result, I quickly acquired a database of a few thousand Bodies and their descendants.
Right, wonderful, wonderful. Did you have a one-name study kind of the idea for it? Or was there something more that led you into that?
I think once I learned about the guild and said, oh, you're doing amazing things, you're doing interesting things, fun things, and I thought, I could do that. I'm certainly not going to do Smith. Nobody in their right mind would do that. Someone I think was already maybe doing Martin, but again, I wouldn't have wanted to do Martin.
There is a Martin one-name study.
Yeah, it is, but it still looked very difficult.
Yeah.
And I said, no, but nobody's doing Bodie, and I've already done all this work. Why not do that? And it may turn out that most of the Bodies are going to be related to me. Now, I realize not all. There are some branches that I'm not sure they're at all related that went from Scotland into Canada and then came into a little bit of the northern United States. But those don't seem to be related to the ones I'm related to, which are from England to Virginia.
Right.
So as a result, I realized, okay, but I should track them because one of the things I realized as a one-name study is then I can distinguish them from mine. If I can keep track of the ones that aren't really my family, but at least I'll know about them and I'll know who they are. So if they pop up in my research, I can go, okay, I know who those people are. They're not my family.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, but I think you pretty much make your living out of genealogy these days. How did you manage to take it to the next level?
Well, several things have happened over the years, but the first thing that really got things to a higher level after all the speaking and writing articles was in 2005. And I was I was actually at that time, I was teaching full-time for the University of South Florida. I was in the library science program as an instructor. So and most of the classes were distance classes. Most of our students were not in Tampa. They were all over the state of Florida.
Okay.
And so I was teaching through distance education, but I found that distance educators often get lower evaluations from students than educators who have face-to-face interaction.
Yeah,
and I studied that. It's very tough. But I realized that I needed a way to connect with my distance students. So I started exploring audio alternatives to say, well, what if I record my voice and put it in the online class so people can be welcomed by me? And then as I'm exploring, I'm discovering podcasting in 2005. And I immediately say, well, podcasts are on all kinds of topics. Although podcasting was very new, so there weren't as many as there are today, of course. I said, well, who's doing it in genealogy? And I realized that a few people had tried it and then given up in a few episodes. Nobody was doing it consistently. I said to George Morgan, I said, George, we should be doing this. Nobody's doing it. We should be the genealogy podcasters.
So how many episodes later is it now?
Between the two formats, over 400.
400, yeah.
Yes.
I've listened to over half of them. Proud subscriber.
It's a lot of fun, and we were eventually joined by other podcasters who came along a bit later, but we really feel like we were pioneers in that area for genealogy, and we had so much fun. So as a result, my brand, my name became the Genealogy Guys. I'm one half of the Genealogy Guys. That meant that people would introduce me that way if I was speaking, and I would go to conferences. George and I discovered we had fans, we had groupies. I mean, not Donny Osmond style groupies, but we had people that say, I listened to you. And this was exciting. And I mean, because when they're podcasting, this is the tough part. You're speaking into a microphone, but you don't see anybody. You don't know how people are going to react. You have to really work hard to visualize your audience. So when I would go to a conference and people would walk up, that would give me one more face to think about when I record. I'm like, okay, I know who my audience is. I've seen them.
So, you've gone from Genealogy Guys now to a new venture. You've extended the brand. So
we have extended the brand.
Tell us all about that, because I suspect guild members all over the world might be interested in this.
They very well might, because
given your
some
background
interest.
with distance learning.
That's right. So we started trying to experiment. We started experimenting with a blog. So George started a blog. So Genealogy Guys blog. But we then said, what could we do? I mean, the podcast and the blog are free. Anybody, it's sponsored. We have great sponsors for the podcast. But what can we do that would be commercially successful that we could do? And we realized, well, there are some successful websites that do genealogy education through subscription. And George and I have a lot of content that we've never really allowed to be recorded that's not available anywhere else. So why don't we take all those presentations that the two of us have done? He's done a number of courses over the years that he owns the copyright to, and we created Genealogy Guys Learn. And Genealogy Guys Learn was just launched on October the 1st of this year. And we actually have a discount for our podcast listeners. So if they go back and look at the episode where we talk about the launch, our podcast listeners can get a discount for an annual subscription to Genealogy Guys Learn. And you can get as much content from it as you like during the time you're a subscriber.
Particularly for guild members who may not be doing American genealogy, is there primarily an American focus to begin with?
It's actually,
it's a
mixture. It is a mixture. We have basic and intermediate, but we do have records that are even English records. I believe George has done some things with English records that certainly, if not today, we're going to be adding new content every month. And I know George has done things with parish records before and other records. I do types of presentations that are usually not record specific. So I do things on organizing, on methodology, on using technology. And so in a way, it's international.
And just for the sake of anybody who doesn't know, I'm a proud owner of one of your books on organizing your genealogy. Can you give us the actual title?
The actual title, at least the first part, because the subtitle I always forget, is Organize Your Genealogy.
Oh, there you go.
And it's published by Family Tree Books, which is now part of Penguin. And so it is a book that talks about how do you organize your desk, your files, your research trips, your all those things.
Yes,
and so
recommended.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Drew, thank you so much for your time.
Paul,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. And maybe if I don't see you in Florida, and probably see you in Salt Lake City in
For
February,
sure.
March.
All right, look forward to seeing you, Paul. Thank you.